Chapter 8. Meet Professor. I wish for nothing. I do not wish to ride horseback, it is too strenuous. I do not wish to walk, it is too tiring. I do not wish to lie down, because then either I should have to lie down constantly, and I do not wish to do so, or I should have to get up, and I do not wish to do that either. Summa summarum, I do not wish for anything. Soren Kierkegaard, Enten-Eller, un frammento di vita. 2007, September 7, Rome. There is a season for everything, to be born and to die. And it had been a long time since Hadrian Farah had silently slid down the pipe of the circular labyrinth, which one enters with the first breath and exits with the last one. He only wished he could move faster. There was but one thing ahead, a big black hole. He wished for it, but he was afraid of it too. After he had been released from the mental clinic, he still remained captive to doubts and regrets for his terrible crime, for his wasted, ruined life. He tried not to think about it. Whiskey helped him a bit, and Hadrian Farah preferred its illusions over his miserable reality. Whiskey would calm him down and ease for a while some of his pains and fears, the unavoidable companions throughout the last 10 years of his life. It also made him sink lower and lower into the mud of a humdrum existence, as useless as the one of the spider in the corner of his ceiling. His was just an afterglow of the long destroyed and nearly forgotten, better to be forgotten, life. Yet no matter how painful and useless it was, for some reason, something prevented Hadrian Farah from putting an end to it, and he resigned himself to the world of living in a different way. He made sure his life was almost undetectable. The two-bedroom apartment Hadrian merited to the good and last will of his father. The old, massive leather chair firmly stood in the middle of the living room as a shipwrecked memorial to Girolamo Farah, that proud and stubborn country gentleman who put an end to the once prosperous Farah clan. The son of his father, Hadrian Farah, finished the job, forever staining the Farah's name with a bloody crime. When there was nothing for him to do, that was his normal situation, Hadrian would stay in his chair for as long as he could, covering sizable portions of his life with sleep, or semi-sleep, drifting away from life on a sea of alcohol or a cloud of marijuana. Whenever he had a little money, Hadrian would go to the bar or to the little restaurant where he oftentimes went when he was a student himself. But most of his time was spent at home, surrounded by a noteworthy collection of books. Those books Hadrian Farah also inherited from his father, who died months before Hadrian was released from the high-security mental institution. The books were a real burden, almost a hazard to his tiny upper-floor apartment, but Hadrian Farah didn't care if the whole world came tumbling down. Professor Farah was now making his modest living by occasional private tours around Rome, mostly for the American tourists, since they didn't know his terrible story. But they weren't the kind of tourists he would like to guide. They were mostly attracted to the traditional sites, to mention occasionally in a conversation that they've been there and seem to enjoy a blur in their heads upon seeing the attractions and hearing many dates and names. Those people learned nothing. Those people saw nothing. Working with the previous couple, Hadrian wasn't sure why they even needed him. All they cared for was to get a few pictures at some typical tourist place, which their friends told them to visit. They'd stay there for a quarter of an hour and then either go back to their fancy hotel and enjoy a sauna, jacuzzi, and a massage, or to sit in a cafe over a bottle of wine. And now that his phone was ringing, he wasn't in the mood to answer it. Most likely it was another group of tourists that wanted him to work for little money. The phone rang and rang. Finally, Hadrian got up from the chair and walked to the kitchen where the phone was. "Professor Hadrian Ferra?" "Yes," he answered. He was taken aback with the respect he discerned in that unfamiliar woman's voice. It had been a long while since anybody addressed him in such a way. "Professor." "My name is Anna Green. I'm an amateur student of architecture." The voice in the receiver sounded young and pleasant, and spoke Italian with a slight Anglo-Saxon accent. "Congratulations," the professor retorted. "And how can I help you, Anna?" "I read your book, Professor," the voice said. "I mean, I really enjoyed reading it, and then I found your phone number." Hadrian shrugged. He heard similar words many years ago, when his book was just published, and when he was at the pinnacle of his glory. "You read my book?" "I enjoyed it," the young, vivid voice said. "I came across it by chance. Our company's architect happened to be one of your students, and he pointed me to your book." As Anna read Professor Ferra's book, she felt as if she had stumbled upon and rediscovered a long-forgotten civilization with its nearly forgotten grandeur. Yet this nearly forgotten civilization continued to live in the ancient buildings, in the architectural forms, in the tradition, and even in the respectable modern-day institutions. Out of all histories, the author insisted, the history of architecture is the most revealing, since it deals not with the biased and oftentimes forged chronicles or records, but with genuine history embedded in stone. The professor used Rome as a primal example of how the study of architecture could alter and seriously challenge people's views on history, if only people would be willing to learn the languages of the art and architecture. "My knowledge of both history and architecture is minimal, and I'm in Rome only for a short time. My father has given me an allowance to spend a few weeks in Rome to practice my Italian and to study whatever else I choose. I'd like, if it is possible, if you are not too busy, to meet with you." "What for?" "I'd really like to hire you as a guide," Anna said, and since the professor remained silent, she continued. "I'd like to use my time in Rome to its fullest. I need a guide who could introduce me to the Roman architecture." "I suggest you take a regular tour guide," Hadrian said rather rudely. "Why hide under the illusion of an old life? To go back home would be hell on earth. It would mean to sink deeper into depression. But on the other hand, how much deeper could it be?" "I know, Professor, that your qualifications are way beyond my modest needs and interests," the young voice replied. "Yet, as my father says, one should always aim for the best, not for second best." The young voice was cheerful and full of life, and Hadrian all of a sudden felt ashamed of behaving, thinking, and talking like a grumpy old man. He wasn't even old, he resolved and tried to convince himself. For a few weeks ago, he silently commemorated his 50th birthday. Deep inside, he was pleased with what he had just heard. He didn't recall the name of the student that the young lady referred to, yet he did remember how many students considered him to be the best teacher they had ever had. And what if this young lady had good money to offer? This was what he now needed so badly. Perhaps if he could get $100 or $200 a day, it would be worth it. There was a momentary pause on both sides of the line before the young voice said, "I understand that your time is very valuable, Professor, and I'm not asking for you to spend it with me for nothing. As I said, my father has given me an allowance to pursue my amateur interest. If you would consider guiding me in my Roman sightseeing, I know nobody else in this city, I would gladly pay you 3,000 euros a week to be my guide. If you are comfortable with this amount, of course. Or else I can ask my father, and I'm sure he can increase my allowance. And I would be practicing my Italian, talking to you. I don't know how long I can stay in Rome. Maybe just for a couple of weeks, maybe for a couple of months. My father might call me when he needs me. I work as one of his assistants. But I'd really like to get the most out of this trip. I would really appreciate it, Professor, if we could at least meet and discuss it. Anna followed the outline of her detailed instructions that came with the professor's dossier. Hadrian Farah tried to detect an irony in her voice. There was none, or at least he couldn't perceive it. She was obviously a rich girl, and in a matter of a few weeks he could probably earn more money than he usually makes in months. But does she know about his being Jack the Ripper? And if she doesn't, shouldn't he tell her? Well, of course, Professor Farah confirmed. Of course we shall meet. It's a very interesting proposal. But I still believe you'd be better off hiring a regular tour guide. This way you'll be able to save yourself a lot of money. Money is not an issue, the female voice replied. Even though I'm not an architect, I might occasionally have some questions that a tour guide would not be able to answer. I would really appreciate it, Professor, if you'd be able to be my guide. The freshness and melody of the voice on the other end of the line revitalized him. He felt as if a fresh breeze had just entered his room, one more time alluring him into the world of possibilities, or a new beginning. Of course, it was only an illusion, but even an illusion was better than nothing. Do you know where Café Toreador is? It's right around the corner from my university, the university's main building. I'll find it. Could you meet me there at 6 o'clock? Professor Farah suggested. I'll be at the corner table. Thank you very much, Professor. The voice sounded grateful and appreciative. You are welcome. I'll see you there at 6. I'll see you. Hadrian hung up the phone. Deep inside of him, the pilot light of life had not been snuffed out. But how will he tell this young lady that he's a murderer? She'll take off the moment she finds it out. And what if she doesn't take off? Hadrian the skeptic inquired. If she doesn't, then she has some other agenda that she's hiding, he concluded,